While preparing for his Joker role in Suicide Squad, Jared Leto tried so hard to be edgy that he terrified his own castmates. He reportedly mailed them a dead pig, bullets, pornographic objects, and even a live rat. Some actors also claimed he sent used condoms, though Leto denied this, but multiple sources insist the gifts were so revolting that people genuinely felt unsafe around him. Despite all of his extreme method acting, most of Leto's scenes didn't even make the final movie. And when it finally came out, fans and critics agreed his Joker was one of the worst interpretations ever put on screen. In 1937, 20-year-old Patricia Douglas was hired for what she thought was a film job, only to be taken to a booze-filled MGM party where she was forced to drink and brutally raped by a salesman inside a car. Instead of taking hush money, she did the unthinkable for the era. She filed a lawsuit against MGM, publicly accusing the studio of covering up the crime. But she would find out the hard way that MGM was untouchable. They paid off witnesses, falsified medical records, smeared her as a drunken prostitute, stalked her, and blacklisted her from Hollywood. The case was dismissed, the press mocked her, and her life was completely destroyed. Patricia vanished from the public eye, and Hollywood buried her story for nearly 70 years, until the truth was finally uncovered after she died in 2003. Child actor Kyle Massey, who played Corey Baxter in That's So Raven and Corey in the House, was once a family-friendly icon. But in 2019, a 13-year-old girl and her mother filed a lawsuit, accusing Massey of sending her explicit photos, videos, and sexual messages. The girl had met Massey years earlier when she was just 4, after her mother introduced them on a set. According to the lawsuit, Massey later reconnected with her and promised to help launch her acting career. But 2 years later, prosecutors in Washington state charged Massey with immoral communication with a minor, after investigators found that he allegedly sent nude photos and videos to the same underage girl through Snapchat. Kyle never showed up to his court date, and a warrant was issued for his arrest, but his lawyers later claimed he'd never been properly served. While Massey denied all allegations, the case effectively ended his acting career, leaving fans stunned that the goofy kid from Disney could end up being accused of something so disturbing. As of now, no conviction has been publicly reported, and the legal proceedings have faded quietly from headlines, but the case still remains a strange, unsettling fall from fame for one of Disney's once brightest faces. In the 1950s, doctors at Tulane University, led by Dr. Robert Heath, conducted one of the most disturbing neuroscience experiments in history. They implanted an electrode into a woman's brain, right in the region responsible for pleasure, and gave her a button that let her trigger it whenever she wanted. The result was terrifying. She began pressing the button non-stop for hours, then days, completely abandoning her family, her responsibilities, and even basic hygiene. She refused to eat or sleep, ignored everyone around her, and focused only on getting another jolt of artificial euphoria. She pressed it so obsessively that she developed an open, bleeding sore on her finger, but kept going anyway. When doctors finally took the device away, she begged them to give it back, became depressed and agitated, and even showed withdrawal-like symptoms because nothing in real life gave her pleasure anymore. The case horrified researchers so badly that human pleasure center experiments were largely shut down because it proved that if you could manually trigger happiness, it might destroy your ability to live without it. After his mother's death in 1989, actor Michael Caine discovered a family secret she'd hidden for over half a century. He had an older half-brother named David who'd spent his entire life confined to a psychiatric hospital. His mother had given birth to David long before marrying Michael's father, but when the boy developed severe epilepsy and was institutionalized as a teen, she told everyone she was just visiting a cousin each week, never revealing the truth even to her own sons. Caine only learned of David's existence when he was in his 50s, realizing that while he was building a life of fame and fortune, his brother was wasting away in a mental asylum and died completely forgotten. Just a century ago, a Down syndrome diagnosis was a death sentence, as parents were often told not to get too attached. In the early 1900s, the average life expectancy was barely 12 years. Most children died from infections or heart defects long before adulthood, often abandoned in mental hospitals and forgotten by their families. Even by the 1980s, very few people with Down syndrome lived past 25. But today, medicine and compassion have finally caught up. Thanks to modern care and advancements in heart surgery, people with Down syndrome now live well into their 60s and beyond. Proof that what was once a tragedy of neglect is now a story of survival. In 2015, 20-year-old Lauren Bunner took his ex-girlfriend, 18-year-old Jolie Callan, hiking at Mount Cheaha, the highest point in Alabama. Just before sunset, he took a haunting photo of her taking in the view at the edge of a cliff, completely unaware it would be the last thing she ever saw. Moments later, he shot her twice in the head before pushing her body off the mountain. Bunner later called 911 and calmly confessed, claiming it was part of a suicide pact he couldn't go through with, but investigators found no trace of such an agreement. It was premeditated murder, and in 2017, Bunner was sentenced to 52 years in prison for killing the girl he once called the love of his life. In 2009, Michelle Fox was accidentally shot in the face by her husband while he handled a loaded shotgun. The blast destroyed almost everything. She lost both her eyes, nose, and entire upper palate. Surgeons couldn't fully rebuild her, so they created a custom magnetic prosthetic face made from silicone and acrylic that literally snaps onto metal implants in her skull. She now lives every day with part of her face detachable, a tragic reminder of how one careless moment can erase your identity in a split second. In 2004, 23-year-old Florida teacher Deborah LaFave was arrested for having an illegal relationship with her 14-year-old student, in other words, raping him, after the boy's aunt caught them together and alerted his mother. What made the case even more disturbing was the public's reaction. Instead of outrage, much of the media fixated on her looks, calling her too pretty for prison, and treating the abuse like a scandalous affair rather than a crime. She pled guilty in 2005 and was sentenced to 3 years of house arrest, 7 years of probation, and lifetime registration as a sex offender, but never spent a single day in prison. These were the final texts sent by Eddie Justice as he hid in the bathroom during the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, one of the deadliest mass shootings in American history. For 3 terrifying hours, the gunman roamed the club and executed anyone he saw, killing 49 and wounding 53. Victims tried to barricade doors, play dead, or call loved ones as SWAT teams surrounded the building. When police finally stormed in and killed him, the scene inside was pure horror. Bodies stacked all over, blood flooding the dance floor, and phones still ringing in the pockets of victims. On October 19, 2025, 18-year-old Kimber Mills was celebrating with friends at a bonfire in Alabama when 27-year-old Steven Tyler Whitehead showed up uninvited, a stranger to nearly everyone there. Witnesses say he began harassing people at the party before pulling out a gun and firing into the crowd. Kimber, who had never even met the man, was struck in the head and leg. Her friend Silas McKay, who intervened and tried to protect her, was shot several times but survived after multiple emergency surgeries. Kimber was rushed to UAB Hospital in critical condition, but her brain injuries proved irreversible. As her family made the heartbreaking decision to remove her from life support, hundreds of classmates, teachers, and nurses lined the halls for her honor walk, a silent tribute to a girl whose compassion lived on through others. Her heart went to a 7-year-old boy and her lungs to another patient in need, an ending that reflected the kindness she'd hoped to share as a future nurse. Whitehead has been charged with murder and multiple counts of attempted murder, but has yet to fully explain why he opened fire that night, leaving a community completely shattered by his senseless act of violence. In 1935, Ann Cooper Hewitt, daughter of wealthy inventor Peter Cooper Hewitt, checked into a San Francisco hospital for what she believed was a simple appendectomy, but woke up unknowingly sterilized. Her own mother had secretly convinced the surgeons to tie her fallopian tubes while she was under anesthesia. The motive was pure greed. Anne's father's will stated that if she ever had children, she would inherit millions. But if she died childless, her fortune would revert to her mother. To secure the money, her mother permanently destroyed her ability to have children, then tried to justify it by calling Anne mentally unfit and promiscuous. Anne later sued in one of the most shocking court cases of the 1930s, but despite national outrage, the criminal charges were quietly dropped. The case was settled in private, and Anne's mother never spent a single day in prison. For the rest of her life, Anne struggled deeply with depression and died at just 40 years old, while her mother outlived her by more than a decade and died comfortably in 1969. In 2003, 17-year-old Jessica Santillan came to the U.S. from Mexico with her family, who had crossed the border illegally in a desperate bid to save her life. Jessica suffered from a congenital heart defect, and after years of struggling to breathe, Duke University Hospital agreed to perform a rare and risky heart and lung transplant. The operation began as a miracle in motion until everything went wrong. The organs Duke transplanted came from a donor with the wrong blood type. Jessica was O positive, the donor was type A. Within Within a few hours, her body went into violent rejection. Her skin turned purple, her body swelled, and doctors realized the unthinkable mistake. They'd given her incompatible organs. 2 weeks later, they found a new donor and performed a second transplant, but Jessica never woke up. She was declared brain dead on February 22nd, 15 days after the first transplant. A family who risked everything to save their daughter lost her to a clerical error, and her death forced hospitals nationwide to overhaul how transplants are verified forever. On June 18, 2011, Amy Winehouse took the stage in Belgrade for what would become her final major performance and one of the most painful nights of her career. She stumbled through songs, slurred her words, and forgot entire lyrics as the crowd began to boo. Serbian media called it a national embarrassment, and even government officials described the show as a disgrace. Within days, the rest of her European tour was cancelled so she could recover, but she never did. Just over a month later, on July 23, 2011, Amy was found dead in her London home from alcohol poisoning at the young age of 27. Elsa Koch, wife of Buchenwald commandant Karl Otto Koch, became infamous for her sadism towards prisoners during the Holocaust. Survivors claimed she ordered beatings, stole from inmates, and selected those with distinctive tattoos to be killed so their skin could be turned into lampshades, book covers, and gloves. Nicknamed the Bitch of Buchenwald, she was convicted of war crimes, sentenced to life in prison, and died of suicide in 1967. Her name forever tied to some of the most grotesque atrocities of the Nazi regime. During the filming of Sinister in 2012, the chilling home video scene showing a family being hanged nearly turned into a real-life tragedy. The stunt used actual harnesses and cables to simulate the hangings, but on the very first attempt, something went horribly wrong. One stunt performer slipped from their foot stirrups, causing the harness to immediately tighten around their neck. They were briefly severely choked before the crew had to cut them down, leaving everyone on set horrified as they'd almost witnessed an actual hanging. Director Scott Derrickson immediately shut down production, fired the stunt coordinator on the spot, and later admitted it was one of the scariest moments of his career, as a scene that was meant to terrify audiences had almost claimed a real life. In 1996, Karen Wetterhahn, a respected chemistry professor at Dartmouth, accidentally spilled just a few drops of dimethylmercury onto her latex gloves while conducting an experiment. The liquid seeped through in seconds, but she didn't know it, and for months she felt perfectly healthy. But then her speech began to slur, her balance faltered, and tests revealed her body contained 80 times the lethal dose of mercury. As the poison attacked her nervous system, she slipped into a coma, paralyzed but still aware, before dying 10 months after the accident at just 48 years old. In 2021, 75-year-old cyclist Dave Richards was hit by a drunk driver in Bristol, England, suffering catastrophic injuries that left him with burns across half his face, a shattered pelvis, and the loss of an eye. For years, he avoided mirrors and crowds, haunted by his own face and the looks of strangers. But in 2025, doctors at the Bristol 3D Medical Center gave him something never performed before, a 3D printed facial prosthesis that perfectly matched his skin tone, hair, and eye color. Using detailed scans of his head, they built a custom silicone replacement that restored the face he'd lost. In June of 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman proudly posed beside his science fair project on tree frogs at Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon. It would mysteriously end up being the last photo ever taken of him. Moments later, Kyron was seen walking down the hallway toward his classroom and then upright vanished somewhere inside the school building. Despite an immediate search of every classroom, closet, and crawl space, no one ever saw him leave. When he didn't return home that afternoon, police launched one of the largest search efforts in Oregon history, combing the surrounding woods and rivers for months. His stepmother, Terry Horman, was the last person to see him alive but was never charged. 15 years later, the boy who disappeared inside his own school has never been found. In 2017, Tennessee doctor Paul Locus was celebrating Halloween dressed as the Joker when he got an emergency call that one of his patients was in labor. Still wearing full makeup, green hair, and a purple suit, he rushed straight to the hospital to deliver the baby. The mother later said she couldn't stop laughing as her baby entered the world in the hands of a Batman villain. Here's a photo of a Turkish soldier whose face was severely disfigured by artillery fire during the Battle of Gallipoli in World War I. He likely didn't survive long enough for any meaningful reconstruction to be attempted. In the 1830s, Spanish-born criminal Diogo Alves terrorized Lisbon by robbing travelers on the city's aqueducts and throwing dozens to their deaths below, earning him the nickname the Aqueduct Murderer. After later killing a wealthy family during a botched robbery, he was caught and hanged in 1841. Scientists then severed his head and preserved it in formaldehyde for study, where it still sits on display at the University of Lisbon, eerily intact nearly 2 centuries later. In 2008, 18-year-old Joshua Maddox left his home in Woodland Park, Colorado for a short walk and was never seen again. 7 years later, his mummified body was discovered inside the chimney of an abandoned cabin less than a mile from his house. He was found in a fetal position wearing only a thermal shirt with his other clothes neatly folded nearby. The coroner ruled his death an accident, suggesting he tried to enter the cabin through the chimney and became trapped. But the bizarre details, his position, the missing clothing, and the fact that the chimney was blocked off from the inside have fueled theories that Joshua didn't end up there by accident but was placed there by someone else. In 1930, a mannequin appeared in the window of a bridal shop in Chihuahua, Mexico, so lifelike that locals swore she wasn't made of wax at all. Her glass eyes, detailed hands, and visible veins fueled rumors that she was the embalmed body of the shop owner's daughter, a bride who died on her wedding day. Nicknamed La Pasqualita, she's remained on display for nearly a century, still leaving visitors to wonder if they're looking at a mannequin or a corpse in a wedding dress. Moments before tragedy, passenger Dave Halley snapped a photo of his wife Kim and their 4-year-old daughter Megan, smiling from their seats on Malaysian Airlines flight MH17, unaware it would be their final picture. Minutes after takeoff, the plane was struck by a Russian missile at 33,000 feet, exploding mid-air and scattering wreckage and bodies across miles of Ukrainian farmland. Every one of the 298 passengers and crew was killed instantly. Some of their belongings and passports later found among the debris of what investigators called one of the most awful war crimes in aviation history. Yet Russia continues to deny involvement to this day, still refusing to extradite those responsible or pay any reparations for the awful tragedy. A Colorado man named Dwayne Johnson developed a rare and irreversible lung condition known as popcorn lung after years of eating and inhaling the buttery fumes from multiple bags of microwave popcorn every day. The artificial butter flavoring contained diacetyl, a toxic chemical that can scar and destroy airways over time. In 2012, a jury awarded him $7.2 million after ruling that the popcorn maker failed to warn consumers of the dangers. Doctors said his lungs had deteriorated so badly that they resembled those of an industrial worker exposed to chemical vapors for years, all because of his daily snack habit. On Halloween morning in 2025, former TV news anchor Angie Mock was arrested in Wichita, Kansas, after allegedly stabbing her 80-year-old mother Anita to death inside their home. When police arrived, Mock was reportedly covered in blood with cuts all over her hands, while her mother was found deceased in bed with multiple stab wounds. Dispatch audio captured Mock claiming she stabbed her mother to save herself, though no evidence has yet explained what that meant. The once trusted newswoman, who had anchored for Fox 2 St. Louis, is now charged with first-degree murder and held on a $1 million bond. In 1998, Thai pop star Ruangsak Loichasak boarded Thai Airways Flight 261 and took seat 11A. Moments later, the plane crashed, killing 101 people on board, but Ruangsak miraculously survived, earning himself the nickname Iron Bones. Nearly 27 years later, history repeated itself when an Air India flight went down in 2025, and once again, the sole survivor was seated in 11A. Ever since, that seat number has become one of the fastest to sell out, since customers believe it will give them a higher chance of survival if the plane happens to crash. As a teenager, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's family was struggling so badly that they were evicted from their apartment in Hawaii. Not long afterwards, Johnson witnessed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His mother stepped out of her car on a busy highway and began walking towards oncoming traffic. Luckily, Dwayne sprinted after her and pulled her back just before she was hit. Years later, he revealed that the incident was a suicide attempt brought on by their dire situation, saying he never forgot how powerless he felt in that moment. In 2008, 39-year-old Stefan Miller was helping his cousin, Hollywood animal trainer Randy Miller, film a promo video with their 700-pound grizzly bear named Rocky, the same bear that starred alongside Will Ferrell in Semi-Pro that same year. But in an instant, the trained bear turned deadly. Without warning, Rocky suddenly lunged and bit deep into Stefan's neck, crushing his spine and severing an artery. He bled out within minutes as horrified crew members looked on. The bear, raised in captivity and for years considered to be safe, proved that even the the most well-trained predator can revert back to its instincts in a heartbeat. In 2021, escapologist Jonathan Goodwin attempted one of the most dangerous stunts ever filmed for America's Got Talent Extreme, but it went catastrophically wrong. Suspended in a straitjacket between two swinging cars rigged to explode, the timing malfunctioned and the vehicles slammed together with him still in between before he plummeted more than 30 feet to the ground. The impact severed his spinal cord, shattered both legs and shoulder blades, destroyed a kidney, and left him permanently paralyzed. He was airlifted from the set in critical condition, underwent multiple surgeries, and spent months hospitalized before being discharged in early 2022. Now confined to a wheelchair for life, Goodwin has described the incident as a miracle of survival. The next year, Goodwin filed a lawsuit against NBC Universal and others, accusing them of negligence, inadequate safety protocols, and a production that valued spectacle over human life. The filing claims the stunt was rushed, chaotic, and staffed by a team that lacked the necessary expertise, and that Goodwin will be wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life because of it. The murder of 6-year-old beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey is one of the most baffling cases in American history, and the details are far darker than most people realize. On Christmas night in 1996, her parents found a bizarre 3-page ransom note demanding $118,000, the exact amount of her father's recent bonus, written on paper from inside their own home. Hours later, JonBenet's father reportedly discovered her body in the basement, strangled with a homemade garrote made from one of her mother's paintbrushes, her skull fractured, and her wrists loosely tied as if staged. There are also signs of possible sexual trauma, suggesting she may have been assaulted before or after death. Meanwhile, the autopsy revealed partially digested pineapple in her stomach, even though her parents claimed she went straight to bed that night. A bowl of pineapple with her brother Burke's fingerprints was later found on the kitchen table. There were no footprints in the snow outside, suggesting the killer never entered or left the house. Police later learned the basement window was already broken and the family never fixed it. The most popular theory today is that JonBenet was accidentally killed by her older brother Burke during a sudden outburst, possibly over the pineapple, and that their parents staged the ransom note and crime scene to protect him. This theory, while never proven, explains many of the inconsistencies in the evidence. But despite massive media attention, DNA tests, false confessions, and countless theories involving intruders, cover-ups, and family secrets, no one has ever been charged. Nearly 30 years later, the case still remains unsolved. Neil Peart, legendary drummer of the band Rush, lived through a series of devastating personal tragedies. In 1997, his 19-year-old daughter Selena died in a single-car accident while driving to college. Less than a year later, his wife Jackie succumbed to cancer, though Peart later described it as dying of a broken heart. To cope with the losses, he took a 55,000-mile motorcycle journey across North and Central America to cope with his grief. Though he eventually returned to music and remarried, Peart later died in 2020 after a private battle with brain cancer. In 1991, 25-year-old Gregory Green stabbed his pregnant wife to death and spent 16 years behind bars for the crime. After his release, he married the daughter of a pastor who helped him earn parole and started a new family in Michigan. But in 2016, history repeated itself in a scene far more horrifying. Green tied up his wife, shot her 2 children from a previous marriage, then poisoned and suffocated their 2 young daughters, ages 4 and 5. When police arrived, they found his children dead and his wife bound and bleeding in the basement. Green calmly surrendered, telling officers, "I just killed my family." He later pled guilty to 4 counts of murder and was sentenced to 100 years in prison, ensuring he'll never get a second chance again.